Valentino Rossi won 9 world championships by mastering the most dangerous corners on the planet. He knows exactly what it takes to balance on the razor edge of disaster while moving at terrifying speeds. He understands friction, momentum, and the pure psychology of pressure better than almost anyone alive today. But this week in Rome, the Italian racing legend could not take his eyes off something completely unexpected. He was not watching a high-speed race. He was completely mesmerized by the unbelievable, physics-defying defensive saves of a 19-year-old tennis player named Alex Eala. The Italian sports media is going absolutely crazy right now. The fanatic crowds at the legendary Foro Italico are losing their minds and packing the outside courts just to get a glimpse of her. And it is not just because she is a brilliant rising star from the Philippines, making a miracle run against top-tier opponents. It is because of a specific, highly technical weapon she brought to these red clay courts. A weapon that instantly caught the attention of a master of dynamic movement like Rossi. Mainstream American broadcasters completely missed this crucial detail. They looked at their monitors, saw a young player winning a few tough matches, and casually dismissed it as a lucky streak. They did not see the underlying mechanical brilliance of how she was actually dismantling her opponents point by point. They missed the entire architecture of her movement. Today we are going to deeply break down the exact physical and mental techniques that made a legendary racing champion stand up in his VIP box and applaud. We will examine exactly why this teenager is suddenly the most dangerous, unpredictable dark horse in the entire WTA right now. Rossi knows an apex predator when he sees one, but the thing that truly shocked the motorsport icon was not simply the final score on the board. It was the exact, calculated method she used to turn the most brutal, unforgiving clay court in the entire world into her own personal playground, using a movement profile you almost never see in modern women's tennis. To truly understand why this specific performance is sending absolute shockwaves through the professional tennis world, you have to understand the cruel, exhausting, and often humiliating reality of the Masters tournament in Rome. The Foro Italico is absolutely not like any other clay court on the professional tour. It is essentially a modern gladiator arena. The crushed brick surface here is incredibly heavy, dense, and slow. The ball bounces violently high, constantly kicking up above the shoulders and forcing baseline players entirely out of their established comfort zones. The weather conditions can shift from blinding Mediterranean sun to heavy, thick humidity in a matter of minutes, completely changing the aerodynamics of every single rally. And the Italian crowd is legendary for a reason. They are deafeningly loud, deeply passionate, and fully ready to swallow you whole if you show a single ounce of fear, fatigue, or hesitation. It is a hostile environment that routinely crushes young players mentally long before their physical bodies even begin to give out. Before this prestigious tournament began, absolutely nobody expected Alex Eala to cause an earthquake here in the Italian capital. Traditional tennis analysts back in the United States looked at her aggressive, flat-hitting baseline game and immediately decided she was built purely for fast North American hard courts. They confidently predicted that the slow, agonizing, grinding nature of European red clay would completely neutralize her raw baseline power. They assumed she would quickly burn out in the punishing 20-shot physical rallies that always define this specific tournament. Playing on this heavy dirt surface at an elite championship level requires a perfect, seamless blend of defensive footwork and extreme topspin just to survive the first few rounds. You have to learn how to slide into your shots with absolutely perfect timing, recover your center of gravity instantly, and manage a completely chaotic, unpredictable match tempo against clay court specialists. Most 19-year-olds come to Rome just hoping to survive the brutal baseline warfare and maybe learn a painful lesson or two for the future. They play timid, defensive tennis. They wait patiently for their opponents to make unforced errors. But then the main draw matches officially started, and the entire tennis world quickly realized something utterly terrifying. Alex Eala was not just surviving the heavy clay conditions, she was actively weaponizing the dirt. She took the exact environmental elements that usually make Rome a total nightmare for rookies and used them to absolutely suffocate her veteran, highly ranked opponents. She did not fight against the sliding surface. She used the extreme friction to amplify her own lethal court coverage and force impossible angles. Watching her adapt so flawlessly and confidently to a surface that was universally supposed to be her absolute greatest weakness makes you realize we are actively witnessing the birth of a generational tactical genius. Understanding how rare athletes like this completely rewrite the fundamental rules of their sport in real time is exactly what we love doing here. If you are deeply fascinated by how elite competitors unlock these hidden levels of peak performance and totally outsmart the entire professional tour, you should join our community right now so we can keep exploring these incredible tactical breakthroughs together. And you will definitely want to pay close attention to this next section because what we are about to uncover is the precise, mind-bending biomechanical secret that left a speed demon like Valentino Rossi completely speechless. Let us examine the exact moment she slams on the brakes deep in the backhand corner. Most professional tennis players on the WTA Tour need at least a full tenth of a second to completely stop their forward momentum and change direction on a heavy clay surface. They sprint hard, slide awkwardly into the ball, strike it, and then have to muscle their way back to the center of the court using pure leg strength alone. It is physically exhausting and mechanically inefficient. You can actually see the heavy strain on their knees and ankles as they fight against the massive friction of the red dirt. But the slide technique of Alex Eala is fundamentally different from anything we are seeing right now. Her angle of entry into the slide allows her to absorb all of that violent kinetic energy and instantly bounce directly back into a neutral ready position. It is exactly how Valentino Rossi hugs a sharp, dangerous hairpin turn on a professional racing track. He does not fight the massive forward momentum of his motorcycle. He leans directly into the apex of the curve and lets the pure physics of the turn do the heavy lifting for him. Eala is doing the exact same mathematical equation with her footwork. She uses the extreme friction of the crushed Italian brick to load her legs like tightly compressed springs. The recovery time metrics we are seeing from her baseline matches in Rome are completely absurd for a teenager. While elite veterans are taking precious milliseconds to dig their heavy shoes out of the deep dirt, she is already floating effortlessly back to the middle of the baseline. She is always one step ahead of the rally. Let us analyze a very specific, mind-blowing rally from the second round to see this mechanical perfection in real action. Eala was pulled miles outside the doubles alley by an incredibly heavy, violently spinning cross-court forehand. The ball was dropping fast and kicking up viciously off the heavy clay. Any normal player on the tour would have desperately sliced the ball back high into the air just to buy a little time and pray for an unforced error. They would have accepted their defensive position and braced for the next heavy attack. But Eala did not panic for a single second. She executed a flawless, perfectly balanced deep slide, dropping her center of gravity dangerously low to the ground to match the bounce. She absorbed the heavy, punishing pace of the incoming shot, stabilized her core instantly, and unleashed a massive, flat winner straight down the line. It was a breathtaking 15-shot rally that ended with an explosive, immediate transition from desperate baseline defense to pure, unadulterated offense in a fraction of a second. This is exactly what caught the eye of a legendary racer. The sheer biomechanical efficiency on display is totally staggering. Every single step she takes is perfectly calculated to conserve maximum energy while simultaneously generating explosive racket head speed. She is not just running around the tennis court chasing the ball. She is carving precise, deadly geometric lines through the clay. Her opponents are playing a brutal physical game of attrition, but she is playing high-speed, athletic physics. The deeply passionate Italian fans recognize this rare brilliance immediately. They deeply appreciate the technical artistry of a perfectly executed defensive slide just as much as a blistering offensive ace. They know they are watching something incredibly special unfold in front of them. This incredibly efficient, flowing movement explains exactly why she is not getting physically exhausted in the punishing Roman humidity. She is saving massive, crucial amounts of physical energy on every single rapid change of direction. Over the course of a brutal 2-hour match, those saved fractions of a second compound into a massive, insurmountable athletic advantage. By the time the third set arrives, her elite opponents are breathing heavily and missing their targets by wide margins. Eala looks like she just stepped onto the practice court for a light morning warm-up. This movement profile alone is enough to explain why she is suddenly dominating matches she was mathematically supposed to lose. The footwork mechanics explain exactly 50% of her terrifying dominance at this prestigious tournament. But the other 50% is a much more ruthless, completely invisible weapon that the television cameras cannot capture. Those spectacular, gravity-defying slides are only the visible tip of the tactical iceberg. The true secret that has the entire Foro Italico standing on their feet in absolute awe does not live in her legs at all. It actually lives in the unique way her mind processes pure competitive chaos. The general public looks at her aggressive, explosive playing style and naturally assumes she is riding a massive, uncontrollable wave of raw emotion and youthful adrenaline. They see a teenager hitting huge, fearless shots on the biggest stage and think she is just swinging freely with absolutely nothing to lose. The truth behind her success is far more intimidating and complex. Alex Eala is operating on the court with a cold, ruthlessly analytical brain. She is not playing with reckless emotion. She is playing with total biological tempo control. While the massive crowd is screaming and the crushing pressure of a breakpoint is suffocating the stadium, her internal processing speed actually slows down to a crawl. She sees the game differently than her peers. This is the rare psychological phenomenon of pressure absorption. Elite athletes in dangerous combat sports often talk about the game moving in super slow motion during moments of extreme, life-threatening danger. Eala is exhibiting this exact same neurological trait on the professional tennis court. When she faces a critical, match-defining breakpoint against a seasoned top 10 player, her decision-making process does not become rushed or panicked. She does not resort to safe, timid, defensive tennis, hoping the other player will simply miss. Instead, she steps directly into the baseline and mathematically calculates the exact geometric angle required to expose the specific tactical weakness of her opponent. The louder and more chaotic the Italian crowd roars, the more incredibly stable her racket head speed becomes. This terrifying level of psychological maturity is completely abnormal for a 19-year-old rookie playing in her first major clay court swing. We usually only see this type of ice-cold, robotic emotional regulation in multiple-time Grand Slam champions who have spent a decade painfully mastering their nerves through crushing defeats. She has somehow bypassed that entire learning curve. I am genuinely curious if you have ever noticed this specific, cold-blooded psychological trait in other legendary athletes before. Does this highly calculating, fearless style of pressure management remind you of anyone else in sports history? Head down to the comments right now and tell me which iconic champion comes to your mind when you see this level of pure mental control, because comparing these psychological profiles is exactly how we understand true sporting greatness. The discussion down there is always fascinating, and I really want your specific perspective on this mental shift. Let us look even deeper into how this mental architecture physically manifests during a tight match. When the score is tied and the physical tension is at its absolute peak, most professional players experience a massive, uncontrollable spike in their heart rate. Their muscles tighten up in fear. Their swings become slightly shorter, more rigid, and significantly less powerful. This is a basic, unavoidable human biological response to extreme stress. Eala somehow completely short-circuits this natural biological response. Her complex swing mechanics remain totally fluid, loose, and violently fast, even when facing a terrifying match point. She breathes calmly, looks directly at her intended target, and swings with absolute, unhesitating freedom. She treats a championship point exactly the same way she treats a casual practice rally on a random Tuesday morning. The heavy situational pressure simply does not register in her highly tuned nervous system as a physical threat. This deeply psychological advantage explains exactly why she is suddenly turning the tables on veteran players who normally feast on the anxiety of younger opponents. The veterans try their hardest to apply severe mental pressure, but there is absolutely nothing there for them to break. Eala simply absorbs their best, most aggressive shots, calculates the geometry of the court, and calmly fires back a calculated, devastating winner. She is completely immune to the traditional intimidation tactics of the WTA Tour. The local media in Rome might sound like they are wildly exaggerating her abilities just to sell newspapers and generate temporary hype. They call her a prodigy and a guaranteed future world number one. It is very easy for casual fans to dismiss this as standard sports journalism hyperbole. It sounds exactly like a ridiculous, fabricated fairy tale built around a few lucky victories, but the raw, unfiltered data collected from the Hawkeye tracking cameras during this tournament proves an undeniable truth that the rest of the tennis world is not ready to accept. We are not just talking about abstract theories or subjective observations here. Look directly at the raw, unfiltered data extracted straight from the tracking cameras during her spectacular third-round performance. The numbers are absolutely terrifying for the rest of the professional tour. The average heavy topspin forehand on the women's circuit sits comfortably around 2,700 revolutions per minute. Players like the dominant Iga Swiatek or the incredibly powerful Aryna Sabalenka use that exact baseline metric to completely push their opponents off the court and dictate the pace of the rally. But when the pressure was at its absolute highest during the deciding set in Rome, Eala was consistently ripping her deep cross-court forehands at well over 3,100 revolutions per minute. She was generating significantly more violent spin and heavy physical bite than the most established queens of the clay court season. And she was doing it precisely when the match was entirely on the line. Just look at her breakpoint save percentage under maximum stress. When facing an immediate match-altering threat of losing her serve, her defensive accuracy actually increased. She saved an astonishing 82% of breakpoints against a deeply experienced veteran opponent who makes a living off punishing weak second serves. These are the brutal, undeniable mathematical facts that completely separate a lucky underdog having a good week from a legitimate, terrifying future champion. Now let us go back to that pivotal, highly emotional moment in the biggest match of her career. It was 4 games all in the final set. The Italian crowd was screaming in a deafening, chaotic frenzy. Her opponent hit a massive, flat return directly at her feet, hoping to force a critical error. Anyone else would have folded under the immense physical weight of that aggressive shot. But Eala simply absorbed the heavy pace, slid perfectly into the deep corner, dropped her center of gravity, and fired a devastating, untouchable winner right past the stunned net player. That exact moment was when the broadcast camera quickly panned up to the exclusive VIP section and captured Valentino Rossi standing entirely on his feet. He recognized the significance of that shot instantly. He was not just clapping for a wildly entertaining tennis rally. He was recognizing the cold, unblinking eyes of an absolute apex predator. He saw the exact same ruthless, highly calculated killer instinct that he relied on to win his 9 world championships on the racetrack. He saw a teenager who absolutely refused to let the chaotic, hostile environment dictate her internal heart rate or her mechanical execution. But there is one specific, highly secretive detail that the major television networks and mainstream analysts completely missed. This single detail is the ultimate proof of her terrifying tactical maturity. Less than 20 minutes before walking out onto the stadium court for that defining match, the sky over the city of Rome suddenly grew very dark. The air instantly became thick with heavy, suffocating Mediterranean humidity. Most young players would just put their headphones on, try to ignore the changing weather, and stick blindly to their original game plan. Eala immediately called her equipment manager over and ordered him to drop the string tension on every single one of her match rackets by exactly 2 pounds. She instinctively knew the thick, humid air would make the yellow tennis ball significantly heavier and much slower off the bounce. Dropping the string tension gave her the exact microscopic increase in trampoline effect she needed to maintain her explosive power and her ridiculously high spin rate through the heavy, wet clay. That is not the panicked decision of an emotional rookie who is just happy to be playing in a big tournament. That is the hyper-analytical, incredibly composed move of a seasoned chess grandmaster, playing 5 steps ahead of the entire board. When you combine that elite level of environmental awareness with her flawless sliding mechanics and her ice-cold biological pacing, the intense excitement surrounding her is not just media hype anymore. It is a mathematical, undeniable certainty. The standing ovation from Valentino Rossi was not some polite, diplomatic gesture to a young athlete. It was a formal public acknowledgement from a legendary champion that a new, highly dangerous predator has officially arrived on the professional sports scene. What happened in the crushed red dirt of Rome does not just stay in Rome. It sends a massive, unavoidable warning signal directly to every single elite player currently sitting inside the top 10 rankings. If a 19-year-old can successfully hack the complex biomechanical code of the most punishing clay court in the entire world, the rest of the season is going to be an absolute nightmare for her opponents. We are rapidly approaching the North American hardcourt swing. Those massive stadium courts are significantly faster, the bounces are much more predictable, and the environmental conditions perfectly favor her explosive, flat-hitting baseline style. If this incredibly composed, tactically brilliant version of Alex Eala is what we are seeing on her absolute weakest, most unnatural surface, then the upcoming United States Open in New York is going to witness a completely unprecedented seismic shift in the tennis landscape. The veteran champions can no longer rely on their superior physical endurance or their traditional mental intimidation tactics to break her down. She has completely nullified their biggest historical advantages. She has fundamentally rewritten the tactical blueprint for how a teenager should perform under extreme, suffocating championship pressure. But there is always a massive, unseen, hidden danger when you rise up the rankings this incredibly fast. The true test of a legendary champion is never really about reaching the top of the mountain for the first time. It is always about whether you have the psychological endurance to survive the extreme, isolating altitude once you actually get there. The entire sporting world is actively watching her every single move now. The global media expectations have multiplied by 1,000 almost overnight. Every single opponent she faces for the rest of the year will now treat her as the ultimate target to beat, fully analyzing her game tapes to find any microscopic flaw. Can she possibly maintain this flawless, ice-cold mental architecture when she is no longer the surprising, unburdened underdog, but the heavily favored superstar that absolutely everyone desperately wants to destroy? Will the crushing daily weight of becoming a global tennis icon finally crack that perfect biological armor? Or will she simply absorb that immense pressure and evolve into an even more terrifying, unstoppable competitor on the hard courts? That is the exact psychological battle we are going to break down in our next major deep dive as she prepares for the brutal, high-stakes summer season. So you need to subscribe right now if you want to find out exactly how she is silently preparing for the biggest test of her entire life.